welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. Before I jump into our third segment of today's show, let me remind you guys, if you're interested in, potentially looking at a career in the gaming, or game design, or esports industries, take a look at what Full Sail University has to offer. Go to www.fullsail.edu/MLG to find out more information about their programs in 3D animation, video production, game design, audio engineering, all these cool different skill sets and education that basically will allow you to get that job in the game design or esports industry. Go ahead and check it out, www.fullsail.edu/MLG. Our third segment today is going to be talking about rushing up to Ultralisks in Zerg versus Protoss. We're first going to talk about the 2-base lair opening. It starts this build off. Then we're going to talk about reacting to seeing an Ultra Rush from a Protoss perspective. A couple things to do once you see it coming. And also defending that Ultralisk push as a Protoss perspective when it actually comes down to the micromanagement. So we're going to start this game at the 3-minute mark. And one thing we're going to look at from the Zerg perspective is when you're doing these 2-base lair techs, it's highly recommended. Of course, you get the pool, then the hatchery. But then as soon as you have a little bit of extra minerals, go ahead and get that extractor. And the reason why you want to do that is because it's very important to get Zerging speed as fast as possible. You're teching faster, so you have less drones on minerals, so you have less mineral income. You have less queens and less hatcheries, so you have less larva production. And these two things equate to the fact that you really don't want your opponent to be warping in a whole bunch of zealots right outside your base. So it's very important to take early map control with the speedings. Whatever 2-base tech you're doing, if you're not going 3-base insane economy, extremely important to make sure there's no pylons ever get close to your base. I've seen a lot of Zergs, even at the pro level, they'll occasionally miss a probe that's like back here. And then, roughly around, well, I'll show you when it would happen. It'll be roughly around like the 8-minute mark, 8:30, depending on how much the Protoss, even 9, it can even be the 9-minute mark. But all of a sudden, 8 zealots walk into Sen's base. And Sen's like, well, this sucks. I got 1 spine crawl, right? And the zealots may even have +1 if the Protoss are currently boosting it like crazy. So really make sure, especially, no matter how you're playing, but especially if you're teching and have less available minerals, less available larva, it's extremely important to use those speedings. I kind of fast forward through it. Well, actually, let's look at it again. We'll drop it back. We'll just take a look at Sen's vision on fast speed, right? Just look at how everything is scouting to make sure there's no pylons around. He already scouted it back here with, he's going to scout here in a second anyways. With Zergins just checking every single possible angle. As soon as he gets that speed up, look at this. Zergins going everywhere, right? As soon as speed gets up, taking map control, making sure there's no probes or pylons hidden anywhere, right? Because if you miss it, if you miss a pylon like here, it's not a big deal. If you miss it right here, or like right here, then it is kind of a big deal. So make sure to check those areas. And that's exactly what he did. So going forward now, the next thing he's going to do is, of course, get the double evos, get those upgrades. And then after he starts the upgrades, his next gas is on lair tech. Why do you get the upgrades before lair tech? Well, it's because Zerglings and speedings are such an important part of this strategy, so you need to focus on the upgrades. You're really primarily concerned in getting 2-2 as fast as possible, more than Hive as fast as possible. And to get that 2-2 up as fast as possible, start 1-1 first, then lair, as the lair tech is much shorter than the 1-1 upgrades. So now from a Protoss perspective, we're going to take a look at this from Huck's point of view. As soon as Huck sees the lair, he sees a bunch of gases, he sees only 2 bases, he's checked all 4, he sees double evos, he's pretty confident it's going to be an Ultralisk rush, right? And the first thing that goes through his mind is, oh no, he's going Ultralisk, I need a 3rd base. Like or do a crazy 2-base timing. Those can sometimes work. That's for another day though. Try to play macro game if you're going to let them get to Ultralisk. You need a 3rd base. You just don't have enough gas to deal with Ultralisk because you need, there's a lot of tools you need. We'll get to that in a bit, but you need that 3rd base. For speedings, it can be tricky. So when you're trying to get 3rd base early on versus speedings, first of all, if the Zerg takes a late 3rd, I wouldn't recommend going for like a 7 to 9 minute 3rd base. I'd recommend waiting until a 10-minute mark until you can have a decent crew of units to go take that 3rd base. You also want to get a jump start to a Colossus. You can do it without the Colossus, but a single or a couple Colossi helps so much at dealing with mass speedings. It is very, very effective. Yes, they're not amazing against Ultralisks, but Ultralisks are not going to be the entire army, and you're not going to have to worry about them for a while. So getting a couple Colossi out early is a really, really great move. So go ahead and take the 3rd base at around a 10-minute mark is kind of your ideal spot, and just go ahead and make sure you defend it. Try to keep eyes on the Zerg and basically how many more speedings are being rallied out. We have to watch out for speedings coming around different angles. Zerg taking a 4th base fast. If he has no 4th base and your 3rd's finishing up, you can probably know he's probably going to do a big attack on your 3rd going forward because he's saving minerals to get a lot of Ultralisks out once that hive finishes. So going forward now, next thing we're going to talk about is defending this Ultralisk push. And it all starts with denying the creep spread, because such a huge part of the Ultralisk push is the queens. Queens are so important. Transfuses, helping protect against air, a little bit of additional DPS, transfuses again, and of course they can also transfuse the Ultralisks. And they're only 150 minerals. So queens are such an important part of this push, and queens are very ineffective off creeps. They're too slow. You can kite away from the Ultralisks. The queens won't be able to keep up, and you won't be able to hit the transfusions. So you want to delay the creep spread as much as you can. And to do that, you should recognize as soon as you have a Colossus out, which he should have had out a little while ago, but I think he was focusing more on observers. As soon as you have a Colossus out with a decent gateway support army, you should be safe against speedings. So as soon as you can say, okay, I have an army now that can beat speedings. I'm not afraid. Okay, right now. What you want to do is bring that observer with you and go ahead and push that creep back. Now, with enough queens and 2-2 speedings, sometimes it can be scary. Especially if you're, Huck's actually stalker heavy enough that he may not be able to actually walk out there. If he gets hit by a fungal, and it could be scary. But as soon as he has 2 Colossus, he could probably go out there and push creep back a bit. Ideally, you'd have a few more Zealots in this. Either way, though, if you think you can do it, if you think this Zerg's not strong enough, go ahead and push that creep back. Now, it's very important you're not stuck down to open when the Ultras come out, but that's not going to be until at least the 14-minute mark, if not 14:30. So you've got some time to go ahead, kill the creep tournaments, delay that creep push as long as possible to try to buy time. Because if that creep gets to your doorstep, that means so can the queens, and so can Ultralisks with proper support. I mean, obviously, Ultralisks on their own can easily get there, but without queens, they're much, much, much less scary. So do your best to slow that creep spread as much as possible. The Zerg spent all the money to build 5 Ultralisks. Until those Ultras come out on the field, the Protoss army should be a little stronger than the Zerg army. I mean, yes, with the upgrades, speedings are actually really scary, but it's not the end of the world. You should be able to push that creep back a little bit, because if it's right here at your doorstep, it's very difficult. So the next step right here is that the Zerg's coming to attack you. Of course, the Zerg wants to attack you sooner rather than later, because the longer they wait, the more Immortals you get, whereas they've already gotten most of their Ultralisks, right? They had the big surge because they saved up money, and now the Ultralisks will come in as fast as they get gas for it, whereas Immortals, you're going to just keep producing at a constant rate throughout the game. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to still delay it as long as you can. So a Time Warp, if you can scare the Zerg into coming in here, that's good. It slows down the speedings, so it's a great move. But if the Zerg's going to commit, what it comes down to is keeping the Immortals alive, right? So what you want to do is you want to think about your front row, your middle row, and your back row. And one thing that's a really genius move here, actually, this is one of the smartest moves I've seen anyone do. Huck morphed 2 Archons there, right into way. And what's so cool about that is Archons, when they're morphing, have a lower attack priority. They're like unburrowed Widow Mines. So the Zerg units are going to, they're not going to attack the Archons. They're going to path around them, which is really going to jam up, especially Ultras, because they're big and fat. Or, sorry, portly, whatever you want to call them. Big boned. They're going to have a hard time getting through, and it helps buy time. Some other things help buy time. Make sure that you have, I mean, Huck just doesn't have many Zealots, but make sure you have some Zealots in the front. Make sure you have some Archons in the front. He's got a couple Archons around there. And also, very importantly, with all these sentries he has, I think he's got 5 full energy sentries back here. 5 full energy sentries make a lot of hallucinations. You can either feed a couple hallucinated Zealots at a time in the front. You can put a hallucinated Archon in the front and hallucinated Immortal. Those are the 3 best options. And just keep those hallucinations up front, because it's very important the Immortals do not get killed. The Immortals are so important to focus on those Ultralisks. You gotta keep these Immortals, stuff in front of them. You don't want the 2 guys with all that non-stuff in front. So take a look at how this game goes, how this battle goes. One thing though is look at how effective this Archon block is. That's absolutely amazing. The units just all get pathed around it. They're not attacking. Finally, they're attacking, and this is the bad part, right? Tuck did a great job, if you notice, of queuing up, making sure the Immortals target the Ultralisks, which is another important part of Micro. But unfortunately, there's nothing in front of the Immortals. Even Stalkers, they're not tank great, but you'd rather have them getting hit by the Immortals. Definitely these Zealots out here. These need to be in front of the Immortals. And you got 5 sentries with a good amount of energy. That's at least, I think that's about 6 hallucinations worth of energy. Those can help you tank as well, because if you lose some of your Immortals here, then of course your damage output decreases, and it's hard to keep up with this rate the Zerg transfuses. and it kind of gets worse and worse and worse. So, as you can see here, right, if Ultralisks can close with Immortals, they will tear them to pieces. It's not that Immortals don't counter Ultralisks, but Ultralisks actually don't do that badly against Immortals if they can close the distance. It's because with the splash damage, the shields will go down quickly, and Ultralisks DPS is actually insane. It's just that they're, you know, normally they have a hard time closing distance because of things like buildings, Archons, Zealots, hallucinations, etc. So, of course, Huck lost too much there, and he moves out to try to push the creep back, and he basically gets swarmed over and dies here. We can see that. But really, the game was, I mean, maybe he could have stayed back and kept hanging in there for a bit, but the important thing there was that battle didn't go ideally for him. And the reason it didn't is because the Mortals were up there in the front. They weren't kept back from those Ultralisks using hallucinations, buildings, add additional pylons, throw them in the way, Zealots, Archons, etc. So, quick recap of a couple things that led Sen to win this game. One thing, it didn't come into play this game, but it's very important. Use speed leans to stop any proxy pylons from getting on the map. Any proxy probe. Make sure that Protoss can't scout you without having to get Observer or use Sensory Energy for hallucination or build a Phoenix. Take all map control with speed leans as soon as you get them, even slow Zerglings. You can usually take map control with as well. So, very, very important as Zerg. Make sure there's no pylons near your base. Send it excellently, but it's such a big deal. It's a really shame. I think Vibe versus Sage, actually. Vibe lost game 2. He won the series, but this is yesterday. He lost game 2 just because he missed a pylon near his base in Ackland Way. So, very important. Keep track of all those pylons everywhere around the map. And then, of course, in the late game against Ultralisks, yes, you want the Immortals, but very importantly, you don't just make Immortals and say, hi, I countered Ultralisks, I made Immortals. It doesn't quite work that way. Ultralisks will kill Immortals extremely fast. You gotta keep those Immortals in the back and give them the time and space they need to take down those big Ultralisks. So wraps up our third segment. Take a short break and be right on to the Q&A.